something which has long been a topic for my reflection in my own practice is that of confidence. I know for many people it's a factor in their training. And I'm talking specifically here about self-confidence, rather than what the scriptures refer to as confidence in the Dharma or in the three treasures. There's a difference between those two. In fact, there are hardly any references that I can find in the scriptures about self-confidence. Possibly because it may be something of a modern malaise which affects Westerners particularly, who are known for their intellectual approach to life, to use a generalization. If we are cerebral and thinking oriented rather than living from the heart and being in touch with our feelings, we can get a bit stuck in our brain boxes, and problems can come from that. And it could also be true that this applies particularly to people in British or even English culture who have a reputation for being quite reserved and buttoned up, maybe. I think we're better than we used to be at sticking up for ourselves and complaining about injustice. But it remains something of an issue. And there's something I sense about us trainees who practice cultivating humility and Sangha that makes us a bit prone to being hard on ourselves, and that can easily create a loss of confidence. But of course, meditation provides us with an excellent means for clarifying all of this and gives us real and useful ways for resolving it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I know in my experience I found that individuals' levels of self-confidence are not fixed, but they increase or decrease dependent on multiple factors, often fluctuating day to day or hour by hour. And whilst we can all be overconfident at times, and also sometimes lack confidence, most people tend to be, most of the time, on one side or other of that middle position. That's to say, there are confident personality types and those who are more hesitant or timid. Now the middle position, of course, is the ideal, where you could say one dwells nowhere. We are neither overconfident nor lacking in confidence. We're just open-hearted and grounded. But we see that confidence comes and goes, and actually that's okay. Sometimes it's present, and at other times less so. I've also observed how people who appear really confident can actually be masking their vulnerability by putting on a front. So we shouldn't be envious of others' apparent invincibility. They might be covering up their low self-esteem by being brash and showy. As overconfidence can have some seriously undesirable consequences. So we shouldn't seek for a kind of bulletproof self-belief, appealing though that might be at times. That would not be the way of Zazen. Now, confidence and trust are very closely linked, and that's a key realization, because when you can deepen trust in your own practice, in your ability to make good decisions, which we can all do, you go a long way to finding true confidence. There's also a connection with the problem of doubt, which is another whole topic in itself. Because again, there are at least two types of doubt which can hinder us. sceptical doubt, where we have no faith in the Buddha Dharma, and self-doubt, which is essentially the same as being low in confidence. Reverend Master G used to talk about adequacy and inadequacy, and these two are connected. We're all prone to feelings of inadequacy, and we try various ways of dealing with those, like distracting ourselves with fantasies about how we would like to be, or how our training will one day make us superhuman. Or we might devote ourselves a little obsessively to our work or some other cause in an effort to feel good about ourselves when we feel we accomplish something and when others give us positive feedback. But craving self-satisfaction and recognition from others is a mistake. These things are nice enough when we get them, but they provide only temporary feelings of adequacy. We end up chasing those good feelings, which is to be driven by desire. These strategies may be relatively harmless, but we can do better than that. Popular psychology has ways of addressing low self-confidence. You probably know professional sports teams these days often employ a sports psychologist. And they say that the difference between performing optimally and failing, or winning and losing, is often down not to skill or athleticism, but to self-belief and being confident. I heard a cricketer say in an interview recently that they had been having confidence problems, and the advice they were given was to behave on the field of play as if they were feeling confident, as that would be an act of confidence in itself, and they would then feel confident. That sounded like fair enough advice to me, but couldn't help thinking that was probably all right as an expedient, but would probably only work as a kind of temporary fix, as it doesn't really address the underlying malaise. It's kind of similar to a phenomenon which I remember being popular years ago, probably familiar to some of you too, that of assertiveness training. Back in the 1980s or so, it was a bit like mindfulness is now, a bit of a fad. And again, probably no bad thing for someone who is in the habit of prevaricating or is a bit tentative in their approach to life to get some practice at going for it with gusto and energy. But unless an understanding of why they hesitate or are unable to commit is gained, the issue will keep re-emerging. And acting in this way will never feel quite right, because we're forcing ourselves to be something we're not. So we're not really being true to our nature. Now, you've probably all read Reverend Master Daishin's recent article on loneliness, where he said that the obvious way to overcome the distress loneliness brings is to reach out and engage with others. But the way of Zazen is usually not to reach for the nearest and easiest solution, but to allow wisdom and compassion to illuminate the question and its complexities, and in that way find the resources within ourselves which provide answers and insight. And that's also the way, I think, to work with confidence. Of course, what mostly underlies this whole story is the age-old problem of fear. And the reason we have that problem, and have had it for a long time, is that it's a really tricky and subtle issue. The roots of fear go so deep that they are pretty much impossible to identify fully. But we can apply the principle Reverend Master Daishin described to training with fear too, or confidence, by acknowledging it, the fear or the lack of confidence, not being judgmental of it, not trying to deny it or suspecting there's something wrong with us, we give ourselves permission to be still with it and get to know it. This is kind of an invitation to the fear to show itself and be accepted by our meditation. And that provides a way for the fear to relax and loosen its grip. We can then see it's not as substantial as we'd thought, and we can more easily than before take the steps that are needed for us to make progress in both our attitude and our actions. We come to learn that confidence problems at root are caused when we take refuge in the so-called separate self. And the reason this refuge doesn't work is that the egotistical I is actually an illusion, a fabrication. It's like a house built on shifting sands. It's unstable and unreliable. This is a crucial realization because it makes clear what we need to do to let go of the self and face the present moment simply with fully functioning senses and see what is needed here and now. We can entrust ourselves to the wisdom and compassion of our own heart rather than in a synthetic persona. And wisdom and compassion are always accessible to us if we are still and open. It's not easy, of course. That's why we try various defense mechanisms and techniques of avoidance to help us deal with life's challenges. These may help to some degree, but they're always unsatisfactory ultimately. Problems with confidence are not helped when we get caught up in thinking, which we tend to do pretty regularly when the self is in the ascendancy. Our mind tends to dwell on problems when it doesn't have anything else to occupy itself, and we can easily end up thinking ourselves in circles. This is where the meditation really helps, as we can notice that happening and remind ourselves to let the thoughts go and come back to whatever is in front of us. We realise we can't, in that moment, do anything about whatever has gone before or what will happen next week that we're preoccupied with. So we have to drop the thoughts and come back to what is needed now. Experiences in our early life shape us in respect to confidence as much as any other factor of our personality. And that personality will never be entirely changed by practice, though fortunately it doesn't have to do so. So long as we aim to maintain an honest awareness of our proclivities, our strengths and weaknesses, we can function imperfectly, perfectly well, and actually celebrate our individuality. Others will also respond with respect to our authenticity and recognise the value of our uniqueness. Wouldn't life be less rich if we were all normal? This is why we stress the importance of acceptance, which includes accepting ourselves as we are. So, rather than regarding past experiences as a millstone we'll never be able to shake off, we see they have contributed to our understanding of the human condition, so we can empathise with others who also have their inherited karmic foibles. So we can allow ourselves to feel that we lack confidence when we do. It's actually an understandable response to a world where we are not in control of much. Life is hard and we have to face many difficulties, and we honestly don't know whether we'll be able to cope with them. We can make our suffering worse by criticising ourselves for feeling intimidated, but instead we should recognise this is our ordinary human vulnerability showing, which is nothing to be ashamed of. Someone who never feels doubt or vulnerability is either a robot or really cold-hearted. and that's definitely not enlightenment. I've found myself sometimes feeling nervous about the future and some responsibility I have to fulfill. And if I can be still with that uncomfortable feeling and make a start on whatever it is I need to do, I find the confidence is there. It's as if in the quiet moments, my brain or heart is reminding me that things could go wrong, so I'd better be careful. And then when the time comes to act, I just focus on the job in hand and go for it wholeheartedly. And that is always enough, even if it's not perfect. And that, you could say, is right effort. So we can get to know the feelings of nerves, give them some space, if you like, to show themselves, acknowledge them, and then let them go, as and when our attention needs to turn outward again. It's easy to worry too much when we're low in confidence, but of course that just intensifies the problem. Again, being still with the worry as well as the nerves is the best thing we can do. It might not make them go away, but it reduces their potential to get worse. It provides enough of an anchor for us to remain steady and not flail about, metaphorically. So actually the scriptures are right, of course, in making reference to having confidence in the Dharma, just as inadequacy is not overcome by pumping ourselves up such that we feel super adequate. True confidence is found by abandoning our attachment to the egocentric self and entrusting ourselves to the present moment with our good intentions and clear senses foremost. Everything we need is found there. And that's how to rely on wisdom rather than an imagined sense of adequacy, a fabricated kind of confidence. Letting go of self puts us in that place. If you aren't sure about the way forward any time, remember you can always turn to your training. That may be to go to your cushion, or it may be in the midst of a pressurized situation to remind yourself to be still and to be kind, or refrain from that cutting remark. Remember, the three treasures are a true refuge whom you can always rely on. They will always be on your side. Knowing our nature, what we truly are, rather than believing the image of ourselves that we like to project, is vital. And that knowledge comes as training goes on, so long as we keep up our commitment to seek the truth. Our delusions can fall away, and we're in that place where our heart is open, not needing to cling to or run away from anything. There is true confidence. That knowledge is not intellectual, by the way. It's probably better described as an understanding of ourselves and our purpose in life. When our training is at the centre of our life, there is a reassuring sense that we know what we have to do. We have a direction to follow. We can see the way home. We know that the path will not be as entirely smooth and blissful as we might wish, but we realise the desire to find a life devoid of pain and suffering is actually a fantasy. We are realistic about things. We are real. Our responsibility is to face whatever life presents and do our best with it. That is enough. And if we keep the meditation up, we enable ourselves to act freely, unconstrained, without fear. We can be confident that selfless giving is the way. practice the Dharma is to give of ourselves completely. We can have confidence in that Dharma.